So the idea behind Kenneth Burke's parlor is that you are coming into a conversation um, late. You're coming in after people have already spoken, already taken sides, um, and because you are at a disadvantage, you have to stop, listen, and figure out who's saying what, who's on what side, um, what your position is going to be. There are some crucial steps to that. First, that you listen to something that's going on before, that you understand the argument in front of you or the arguments, right? The different positions that people have. And then third, that you then join the conversation, right? Um, this is a good analogy for research, for argumentation, for everything that we're going to be doing. There's also kind of a word play aspect to this. Parlor is also close to the French word for language, so he's talking about people in language, right? This is how we function with language. So it goes back to that whole literacy angle as well. You listen to people around you, you do your own thing with language, and then you die. I didn't say it was a happy ending. But the idea here is that you follow these steps, and that is what makes successful argumentation. You listen, you understand, you engage. Listen, understand, engage. And so that is essentially the model that I want you to look, that is essentially the model that I want you to use to think about research. A lot of what we've been doing with integrating outside sources, the whole idea of rhetorical sourcing, has had to do with this this idea that you need to acknowledge, you need to give context for the sources that you use, the research that you're doing. That's great, but the other angle of it that we haven't really touched on yet is that research exists as a conversation. In academic circles, research is meant to be a conversation. We publish research because we want other people to know what we think. Someone responds to us, whether in disagreement or agreement, and advances it or challenges it. And then it's this big back and forth conversation across, history, ages, whatever, different generations of academia. In the real world, it is less of a focus to give a large background to all of the ideas that you had that came before you, but it is still crucial that you understand where your ideas come from, because how else are you going to contribute to a conversation, right? So whereas academia places research at the forefront, it's all about research, it's all about advancing that conversation. If you're writing to a general public, the research would inform what you're saying, and you might acknowledge something briefly, but it is not the sole focus of all of your writing, all of your speaking. Okay, so I stole this from the internet. Go me. I thought I gave credit for it, but apparently I did not. If you read the book, if you read the textbook, the chapters that I'll give you, it's going to outline research as a process, which is very much true. One thing that I think was missing from that metaphor, the Burkean parlor metaphor, is that it is not just, you're not just listening before you speak, because that would put you in a position of, once you do speak, you're just waiting for your chance to talk. No, instead, research, argumentation, listening, conversation functions in this kind of messy, what we call iterative process, that kind of repeats itself again and again. Because when you're in a conversation, say in a parlor, you are going to have to react to what other people say. So you're going to have to listen to what they say and rethink your opinions. In something like this model, right, where you search for information, you read it and assess it, you consider the implications, and engage with it. You ask a question, which leads you on a search for more information, which means you read and assess, which means you have to consider implications of what you're reading and how it impacts your question. And then you have to refine your, right? So all of this follows a process for refining your thoughts or your arguments based on feedback, based on what you find. So you start with one position, and based on what other people say to you, still using the model of the parlor, you start with one question, you start with one statement, you listen to other people's responses, and then based on those responses, you consider how to integrate or reject their ideas, which leads you to an entirely different premise, an entirely different argument, and then we keep going, right? That's the whole idea of conversation. And that, in a nutshell, is why it's best to think of research as a conversation, not as some type of authoritative end-all be-all answer to everything, right? Research is never static. Research is never done. It always keeps going. As a very real example of this in action, you can look at the medical and scientific research on COVID over the past year, essentially, where at the very beginning of the pandemic, people did not know anything about the virus or how to prevent it. And the more, and doctors and scientists made mistakes and used the best knowledge that they had. But as they kept processing information, as they kept making discoveries, the knowledge that they had changed, and the things that they said to the public also changed in response to that, right? That is the nature of research. It's messy. You adapt to what you have. You make the best, you draw the best conclusions that you can, but ultimately you know that the work of research is not done just because you have one answer. It's going to change. The answer is going to change based on what new research, what new information you find after you make that initial, after you get that initial answer.